Welcome to Passion for Living. I'm Paula Tessier, pronouns she, her, hers. I'm the Associate Director for Membership and Communications for the Mass Coalition of Suicide Prevention. This event is sponsored by Department of Mental Health, Department of Public Health, Mass Coalition for Suicide Prevention, and the Alliance for Equity. Together, we're going to explore how the pandemic has impacted the LGBTQ plus community. We will begin by visiting the data, an impressive N of 5,000. That's the LGBTQ youth and adult response size from the COVID-19 Community Impact Survey, the CCIS. Next, a panel of program leaders in the LGBTQ plus community will share how the pandemic impacted communities and what people did to adapt their operations. Their observations will illuminate what is needed to build an even more robust community of support and connection. Our moderator today is Dr. Pata Sugimoto. She, her, hers. She is the co-chair of the Greater Boston Regional Suicide Prevention Coalition, the co-chair of the Massachusetts Coalition for Suicide Prevention, Alliance for Equity, and she serves on MCSP's executive committee. Welcome, Pata.
Welcome everyone to this wonderful panel. I'm really excited as a person who works at the intersection of suicide prevention and equity, and as a bisexual woman, I am really excited to present this panel to you today. So a couple of housekeeping things. We are using the chat function this morning for our questions. Jennifer Kelleher will pull them for us, and we'll be able to answer your questions along the way. We have a expansive amount of time, which is really wonderful. So we will get to some questions today. So please, if you have them, forward them. And if you have a particular person you're addressing them to, just put the name in parentheses or whatever, so we know who to address the question to. So we're going to start with some data. And I'd like to introduce Matthew Tumpney, who is an epidemiologist for the Injury Surveillance Program at the Massachusetts Department of Public Health. His work focuses on using data to help support the suicide prevention program's mission and activities. So Matt, I'd love to hear what you have to say.
Thank you, Pata. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Again, my name is Matthew Tumpney. I'm an epidemiologist at the Massachusetts Department of Public Health. And I'm going to give a brief overview of our COVID-19 Community Impact Survey, also known as the CCIS, specifically as it relates to how the pandemic has impacted members of the LGBTQ plus community. So, there we go. So one of the handouts you should have received is this one-pager. This looks at some of the key findings of the CCIS and provides a variety of resources for LGBTQ plus people. The survey contains results from over 5,000 adults and youth respondents who identified as being part of the LGBTQ plus community. And we chose to highlight how the COVID-19 pandemic affected a lot of the social determinants of health among this population, with regards to employment, to economic stability, mental health, social inclusion, and other topics. The main purpose of this one pager here is to highlight some of the key disparities in health outcomes that we found when we analyzed the CCIS. Which means you'll notice a lot of these results are based on comparisons to another group. For example, as here, LGBTQ plus adults are twice as worried about needing to move out of their home compared to other cisgender or heterosexual adults. However, if you want to know some specific proportions or some more specific data experience around all these health outcomes that we have here, we have another resource to help with that, which is our CCIS data dashboard. And I'm just going to run through a quick example of how you can use the CCIS data dashboard to look up any of the data you might need from it, including all the data that you see on this page as well. If you just scroll down to the second page of this handout, you'll see we have a bunch of links and resources. And if you want to go see our CCIS data dashboard, all you have to do is click this link right here. And if you do, it will take you to this page right here. This site houses the CCIS data dashboard. It also provides a lot of important context about the survey, how to use and interpret the data, and how to understand some of the nuances and caveats that come with this data. But for the purpose of this demonstration, I'll just focus on the dashboard itself. So you can see here we have the dashboard. And if you're interested about additional items about the survey, who took it, interpreting data, you can read this as you wish. So for this example, we'll just go back to the first page of this handout, and we'll look at the mental behavioral health section. Here it says LGBTQA and non-binary adults were up to 3 times as likely to report 15 or more days of poor mental health in the past 30 days compared to cisgender and heterosexual adults. So if we go back to the dashboard, there are multiple ways that you can get to this data. One is by looking at topics. So we have sort of a lot of the social determinant of health topics. If you're interested in mental health outcomes, you can click here. In addition, if you're interested in specific populations, you can click one of the 12 icons that we have here, as well as results by geography. So for this, we'll start by looking at results by transgender. Let's click that one more time. Okay, and then when we click that, you can see we can select which questions we want to look at. We have results by basic needs, COVID-19, employment status, healthcare, housing, mental health, safety, and substance use. So when we're interested in the number of days of poor mental health, that question is right here in this mental health section, which says now thinking about your mental health, which includes stress, depression, and problems with emotions, and how many days during the past 30 days was your mental health not good? That was the question that we asked in the survey. When we click that, we see that there were 3 potential responses that people could have chosen. One is that they had 0 days of poor mental health. One is that they had between 1 and 14 days of poor mental health. And those who said that they had 15 or more days of poor mental health. And this is the group that we want to look at. When we look at responses, among those who are transgender, we see that a little over 62% of them reported 15 or more days of poor mental health. Among those who were not sure of their transgender status, it was almost 66% reported poor mental health. You can see that's almost twice as high as the result that we saw among those who said that they were not transgender, which was about 33%. In addition to looking at results by transgender, we can look at results by sexual orientation as well. As before, we have our list of questions that you can sort through. Again, we can go to the question about mental health, click that, and again, we'll see there's results among those reporting 0, 1 to 14, or 15 days of poor mental health. One of the unique aspects about this CCIS survey in specific is that results are actually broken down by each sexual orientation. So rather than just having one result for all LGBT plus individuals, we have results that are broken down, whether they reported that they were gay or lesbian, or bisexual, pansexual, asexual, queer, questioning, etc. So for this specific question on mental health, one of the things we saw is that those who identified as queer had the highest proportion of those experiencing poor mental health, followed by those who said they were unsure of their sexual orientation, and followed by those who said that they were bisexual or pansexual. And then in addition to looking at data by sexual orientation, we also have results by gender identity. And again, we can scroll down to the question on mental health. And again, when we look at those who are experiencing 15 or more days of poor mental health, you can see that among those who were questioning or undecided on their gender identity, 79% reported having 15 or more days of poor mental health. This is the group that experienced the largest proportion of those experiencing poor mental health out of all of the different groups throughout the entire survey. And in addition, those who said that they were non-binary, 68% said that they had 15 or more days of poor mental health. Now, if you're interested in learning more about these topics, this was just sort of, very quick overview to see, what you can find from these results. But as you can see, the data here expands, well beyond mental and behavioral health. We have, data on housing, healthcare. And if you're interested in looking at those topics, you can obviously go to the CCAS data dashboard. In addition, we have an entire webinar and additional slide deck that really looks at the CCAS data as it relates to LGBTQ plus individuals. We have that link here in the handout as well for you. And in addition, I'll leave links to those in the chat in case you want to look at them as well. But overall, there's a ton of information here. This is just the tip of the iceberg of what we have to share, and we just want to let you know that this is a resource available to you. In addition to that, we have a host of general resources for those looking at gender identity, a number of resources for LGBTQ plus youth. And with that, I thank you for your time, and I'll hand it off back to Pata. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt, so much. That gave us a great context. Appreciate that. So now we're going to jump into the panelists. I'm really excited. We're going to start off with each panelist introducing themselves and their program, what they do. And I'd like to start with Melissa Heckman.
Hi, everybody. Excuse me. I'm Melissa Heckman. I use they, them pronouns, and I am a psychotherapist, supervisor, and mental health director at Trans Health Northampton in Northampton, Massachusetts. So yeah, that's what I do. I've been here about a year. Trans Health has been open for about a year. Prior to this, I actually worked at Behavioral Health Network for about 7 years at Child Guidance Clinic, working with children and adolescents. And here at Trans Health, I am doing individual therapy, couples therapy, family therapy, as well as writing single case assessment letters for surgery for people who are trying to access surgeries. And so what I would like to do is I'm actually going to read Trans Health Northampton's vision and a mission statement to make sure I don't miss anything important. And then I'll tell you a little bit about the services that we offer here at Trans Health Northampton. So you can find our mission statement on the website, but this is what our mission statement is at Trans Health. We are a groundbreaking, independent, and comprehensive trans healthcare center built to empower trans and gender diverse adults, children, and families. Throughout our history as a community, trans and gender diverse people have looked to each other for healing, support, and affirmation. Trans Health Northampton honors that by providing comprehensive and professional healthcare as we open our doors to trans and gender diverse individuals and their loved ones. As a trans-led organization, we are uniquely positioned to expand the healthcare possibilities for our community. Through research, expert care, and fierce advocacy, we work to secure a healthy, affirming future for all of us. And our vision at Trans Health, we are transforming the world so that trans and gender diverse adults and kids are empowered and celebrated as they work with an affirming team to own their healthcare journey. So at Trans Health Northampton, like I said, we've been open for about a year. We have at this point seen over 1,000 individual clients, discrete clients at our organization, which is about double what we had expected for the first year. At this organization, so we offer primary care services for children, adolescents, adults, and older adults. We also offer support for hormone services. So people who are looking to do hormone therapy without changing their primary care provider to us, we do that in an informed consent model here, again, for children, adolescents, well, for adolescents, adults, and older adults. And that's something we also do consultations with. If somebody has a primary care provider who'd like to consult with us about providing hormones, we do work in collaboration with primary care providers in the area to support people with their transition goals. And we also do all virtual primary care appointments. So that's a really important access piece to us as an organization that serves primarily a rural population, but also knowing that it can be hard to find primary care providers all over the state of Massachusetts. We do offer virtual services, both for primary care, for hormone therapy, also for mental health care. So those are our primary care services. And our primary care is also, we work on a health at every size model. So I think that's a really important thing for people to know, that we're a really body positive and sex positive organization. I think our youngest client at this moment is around 4 years old, and our oldest, I would guess, is in our 70s. That's from what I can tell. We also offer we have a psych nurse practitioner, and we're looking to hire more psych prescribers. So people who are looking for medication management, for psychiatric mental health support. We do have at this moment one provider who works in an integrated model, and also we are currently interviewing for a second psych prescriber. I know that that's a really difficult resource for people to find. We also do that virtually, and that we do not require people to have a therapist in order to receive psych services. I know that that can be a real barrier for people. I think we all know how difficult it is to find a therapist at this moment in time. And then we offer as well psychotherapy. At this moment, we're doing psychotherapy mostly on an internal referral basis. We were finding that we had such a need from external referrals that we couldn't meet the needs of the patients who are already in our practice. So we are mostly offering that through folks who are seen at Trans Health Northampton. We're a small group of therapists at this time. We just hired another therapist. Our social work intern just joined us as a full-time therapist starting in May. That's very exciting. And we do have an internship program for therapists as well. So we'll be having 2 interns next year, which we're really proud of too. And then we have our community room. We have a community health worker, Jess Plant, and we have a community services liaison, Mia Loffer, and they run a drop-in space. We have a community clothes closet where people can come and get free clothing, free trans tape, free binders, shoes, coats, all kinds of things. Thank you for that question. I'll answer that in a moment. And also we have some drop-in groups. So we have free peer support drop-in groups on Thursday nights. They're a hybrid of virtual and in person. And we also have we partner with a lot of organizations to offer groups in our community space. And so that's something you can find out about on our Instagram, which is, I believe, Our Trans Health is our Instagram. And that's how you can best find out the services that we offer in our community space. Somebody asked about insurances. So primary care and mental health are a little different. So we do have a few limitations for primary care. Certain types of, I think, mass health we do not take. You can find out on our website. I think that we are keeping that updated to know what insurances we take. For mental health, we take all insurances. And that includes also, I think this is really important for people to know, if you have, if you're looking for or have clients who are looking for letters for surgery, I know that sometimes people don't feel confident writing those letters themselves, or there's a lot of hoops to jump through to get a letter. We do offer single case assessments for letters for surgery, and people can just schedule those through our website as well. So that is, like I said, all insurances. And for primary care, I would ask you to refer to our website at this time. I think that's overall the services that we offer at Trans Health Northampton. Thank you.
Thank you. Very extensive. I appreciate that. Lu-Wei, would you like to share with us?
Hi, yes, definitely. So my name is Lu-Wei Kwan. I use the pronouns she, hers, and I am the peer and program coordinator at MAP for Health, which stands for Massachusetts, Asian, and Pacific Islanders for Health. I joined MAP in December 2021. And I also work in research within the environmental health department at the Harvard School of Public Health. I graduated in 2020, which is, great timing, I know, with a degree in health and human biology, the focus on psychosocial determinants of health. And more about MAP, it was founded in 1993, primarily to address the ongoing HIV/AIDS crisis within the API community in Massachusetts. There was sort of a lack of culturally and linguistically sensitive services for the API LGBTQ community, and MAP was sort of created to fill that missing role. And since then, we've expanded the scope of our operations and programming to address a wide variety, different aspects of mental, physical, and reproductive health, all while trying to maintain that sort of uniquely intersectional and culturally sensitive lens that addresses API and LGBTQ youth and allies within the state. We mainly focus on youth aged 12 to 25. We offer a bunch of different, mainly peer-led support services. So things like one-on-one counseling, drop-in spaces, different talks. We also offer things like educational and professional review services for people who are sort of struggling in school or work. We also have a few physicians and licensed psychologists within our team that offer a more sort of professional, individualized lens for folks who might be seeking that sort of help. We're offering mostly online services at this time, but we're transitioning to more in-person events and services within the very near future, hopefully within the month, if things go as planned. And yeah, I'm super excited to be here to share our perspective and to learn more about everyone else's experiences.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So Shaquille, would you like to share your?
Absolutely. Good morning, everybody. My name is Shaquille Jones. I use the he, him pronoun series, and I am currently the youth service manager at Boston Glass. A little history about Boston Glass. It was started in 1995 as a grassroots organization to support BIPOC LGBTQ youth in the greater Boston area. As of now, we serve about 200 youth within the city limits by providing a continuum of services such as HIV, STI care and follow through, PrEP referrals. We offer mental health services, whether that be in-home and outpatient. And we also operate a drop-in center for the ages 13 to 25, where they can find resources around housing, gender-affirming care. We have a clothing closet for our homeless population who can come in and grab clothes, toiletries, hygiene products. They can meet with behavioral health staff if they're having a rough moment, get referrals to like detox centers. And we also do one case assessments for gender affirming surgeries as well. We are currently in the process, we are currently doing all our services in person. We are hosting different interventions such as Vogue Hour, Mondays and Tuesdays, Art and Anime Club, trans support group for ages 13 to 18 and 18 to 25 every other week. We hold a youth support group called Life Lounge, where youth are able to come in and get paid to share their stories around the struggles that they're having in the community, find support around stuff that's happening at home, and really kind of build a sense of community within the Glass itself. I'm very excited to be here on this panel today, and I look forward to speaking with you guys and learning more about the services that everyone provides.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, Kirsten, can you share with us what your organization does and a little about yourself?
Certainly, as I just unmuted. Hi, everyone. My name is Kirsten Frenny, and I am the board chair for NAGLY, North Shore Alliance for Gay and Lesbian Youth. I go with she, her, her pronoun, hers pronouns, thank you. And my background actually, for many years before prevention funding got cut here in Massachusetts, I was doing HIV counseling, testing, case management. I still currently sit on a community advisory board that is HIV vaccines, which include Fenway, Mass General, and Brigham. NAGLY has been a passion of mine for 16 years. I'm going to give you a little overview like Melissa did. I don't want to miss anything, although I should have this all memorized. But NAGLY was founded in 1992. We're very excited. This year we are celebrating our 30th anniversary. We're actually the second largest AGLY behind BAGLY. And our mission is to honor, respect, educate, and empower our LGBTQ plus youth. We envision a world where queer youth are free to explore, discover, develop, and express their true, authentic selves without fear and with love and support from a diverse community of peers and adult role models. Serving more than 40 towns and cities north of Boston, NAGLY still remains the only organization dedicated exclusively to meeting the needs of LGBTQ plus youth on the North Shore. We have more than 5,000 square feet, which makes NAGLY Center one of the largest facilities exclusively serving LGBTQ plus youth in New England. We feature a health and wellness center offering free and confidential HIV, STD, and STI, Hep C testing. We also offer rape crisis and sexual assault counseling. We have a youth lounge, a unique Naglery, which is one of my favorite. It's an art gallery where youth will come and display. We'll have different events per year, but every piece of art that gets hung up, whatever is sold, the money goes directly back to our youth. We have free clothing boutique as well. We have an appointed library with LGBTQ and non-LGBTQ, so bad, LGBTQ titles. We have an amazing tech center. In the Harrington Room, the multi-purpose space features performance areas for open mic nights, poetry slams. We have a mini pool table, ping pong, foosball, and so much more. So the center, it also boasts an arts and crafts cupboard, as well as a full kitchen where we do twice a year. It was really important for us. There were a lot of youth over the years that never had experienced Thanksgiving. So we do Gays Giving and we do a holiday dinner. But our overall programming at the center, we have a Roots Youth Group, weekly meets ages 14 to 23. We have our Queer Adulting, which is life skills development, which meets bi-weekly for 18 to 23-year-olds. In our middle school program, which we were so excited at first, we were the second organization to be able to offer it for students that are in the 6th to 9th grades. We have Transcendence, which meets weekly for transgender, non-binary, and non-gender conforming youth ages 13 to 23. EPIC, which is our education and parents and communications, which meets monthly. Rainbow Family Fish Day, a favorite of mine, which we can't wait now to get back. So families that either have same-sex parents or children identifying under the umbrella, we do monthly great events where there are just all kinds of different activities. We have various affinity groups, and drop-in hours are normally Wednesdays and Friday afternoons. We do yogas on Sunday afternoon, mentoring with school work Sunday afternoons for ages 14 to 23. And we have multiple satellite programs in Gloucester, Newburyport, and we just opened in Lynn. Just a little bit about the pandemic, though. Obviously, like everyone else, it forced us to close our doors for in-person meeting, which is really what we did. And we ended up having to secure 2 of our advisors to get Zoom accounts and to take crash courses, which I think we all had to do. But what I loved about what we did was based on that, we reached a wider audience, including youth from as far away as Brazil, London, and all across the US. So at this time, NAGLY has literally rolled out additional ways for youth to connect. So we've come back together, which is great. But what we've noticed is that the hybrid program has been really instrumental. And we wanted to make sure, because we still have youth that that still can't come to the facility or be out. So for us, that has been something that we learned through the pandemic that was pretty amazing, that we had thought we had overcome. So with that, yeah, there's one story, and I think we'll share afterwards, about a young trans man from Brazil, but that is us in a nutshell.
Thank you very much. So, and I am blown away by the amount and diversity of services you all provide. You know, I mean, this should be everywhere, right? I mean, it's just not, I mean, we're kind of have 4 examples in different places in the state, but it should be everywhere. So I'm interested now in like how the pandemic has impacted LGBTQ plus community. And I'm also interested in the intersections of other identities or social determinants of health, that kind of thing. You know, I mean, the AAPI community, you know, if you have other communities you belong to, you know, I'm really interested in how that all plays out. So Shaquille, can you start us off? Would you mind?
Absolutely. So coming from the lens of working in Boston with BIPOC LGBTQ youth, we realized very early on in the pandemic that it was very impossible to kind of do our jobs and provide services without being directly interacting with our youth that we are usually coming into our drop-in center. We did our best to kind of accommodate virtual services like virtual interventions. We try to do our best to refer out for HIV, STI testing, but we found that we really had to find ways to get the center back open. So as of like October, we were finally able to open our doors to full capacity and bring youth back into the space, and found that like the youth who were missing from it struggled with the lack of resources and the lack of a safe space to go to throughout the day. The pandemic really robbed them of a sense of safety, and also robbed them of a sense of a place to escape from a world that persecutes them for being their own most authentic self.
Thank you. Thank you for that perspective. Yeah. Safe spaces is obviously a really important place, an important topic, and maybe we can come back to that a little bit more about how that looks. Kirsten, would you like to weigh in? Oh, you're on mute.
So for us, it was pretty much similar. We usually have all of our services that are in person, and I know that for us during the time, we had to end up getting a Discord Discord server in order to reach out and to find ways to connect. And I think one of the hardest pieces was the isolation for all of us, but for the youth in general, and being able to try to connect to find therapists to do online. I mean, it was an overload anyway on the therapists, but to actually also be able to find therapists that had expertise working with LGBT youth and those that were, you know, challenged by not having the connection is where we had just found such a challenge. But with that, we rose up, and our program director, Tony Leone, is instrumental in creating the new programming that was set out and how to outreach online, as well as being able to bring the folks back in once it was time when we opened our doors just a few months back.
Thank you. Melissa, would you like to share?
Sure thing. Right. So I don't want to repeat what other people have said. I will say that when the pandemic started, I was working in a different setting. I was working at Behavioral Health Network. And so we were doing individual therapy all virtually, which was great to be able to offer that. And here we are able to do, like I said, virtual visits in most areas. And also we've put some technology into place to allow for hybrid group options. So we have virtual groups and also hybrid groups where people can come in person. I think being able to meet in person and do groups in person has been something some of my clients have really missed. They don't connect well virtually. They're not comfortable on a camera screen. They're not comfortable seeing themselves or hearing their voice. And so being in a group setting is really healing for them, as other people have said. I think that some things that I've been thinking about that I want to make sure to mention. The first one is that I also am a supervisor. I've been a supervisor for about 5 years, and the majority of my supervisees are LGBTQ people who are serving LGBTQ folks, and particularly trans and gender diverse folks. And so I think we're all familiar, of course, of the toll that the pandemic has taken on us as providers, and the urge to take on more, do more, see more clients, see them more often, make sure they're okay. And I think that that's something that we can't ignore also, that when you are a provider who is in the community you are serving, there's double or triple the impact, right, of your own mental health needs really increasing, and the needs that you have for care and support from each other. And that's also been really reduced, right? Like I've had supervisees I've never met in person. I've had supervisees who came to an organization and never met in person anyone else at that organization, never saw the office, never sat in a room with other providers, never got to pop into an office and say, I just had a really hard session, and we're trying to be new therapists on their own in this context has been a real burden. And so I also don't want to forget that our communities are on all sides of the pandemic, right? We're providing and also receiving services. I also wanted to throw out there something that I've been thinking about too, that while COVID has been very difficult and isolating and hard on people's mental health, I've also had a number of clients for whom it gave them a respite from the world, critiquing and eyeballing them. It gave them a space to really explore their gender safely at home, to not have to go into office and drag, to be able to just like, go into work meetings with their camera off and be whatever self they are, and not be as under the microscope during their transition or exploration of their gender. And that actually returning to work has been in some ways more stressful than the pandemic was for them. And these are people with some resources as in older adults, right? Not older adults, but young adults, not necessarily living in the family home where supports might be scarce. But I don't want to ignore the fact that there are ways that the pandemic has allowed people space and time to really explore themselves without feeling that day-to-day stare that can happen for folks who are in transition or exploring their gender. And I want to keep that in mind too, while we talk about the things that are hard. There are also some things that I think have been really positive. I would also add to Discord that I've definitely had a lot of younger clients who found whole communities on Discord servers that they didn't have before. That has been really beneficial to them while they weren't able to have the in-person relationship. So there's like a both and here, I think.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And also, I think it's really important to highlight, the providers as well, and the community, community that's both receiving services and also providing them. And so how do we support that community as well? Thank you. Lu Wei, would you share, and then we can.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to sort of echo what everyone else has already said, firstly, it definitely makes things much harder to implement. So things like services that traditionally rely heavily on having like one centralized physical location, things we used to offer like testing for STIs, or even just group activities like painting or seeing a movie together, became a lot more difficult, and definitely that sense of community was taken away from us. Something else that I would like to point out is shifting to an online environment. Even things that you would think would be more sort of straightforward to shift to, so things like remote counseling, have also been pretty challenging for us. I think especially within the API community, family units are like very notoriously tightly knit. There's a huge lack of privacy. Things like mental health, things like being LGBTQ+ are heavily stigmatized. So there can be an incredible challenge of even finding the space or the time or the ability to even discuss these issues, even when you are sort of at home and have this internet and technological connection. So we would have a lot of times where we would see, huge increases in people attending our events, and then immediately after, just huge drops of people the very next week. And that does sort of call into question, like, is it because people sort of have this Zoom fatigue and, they're taking a break from these online spaces? Or is it because they don't have the safe space in their homes anymore to discuss these things? Is it because they're grappling with, the social determinants of health that we discussed earlier in the talk, of things like facing housing instability and eviction, or being cut off financially from people they rely upon, that they live with, for discussing these, very heavily stigmatized topics. So, yeah.
Thank you. I was wondering, I think Melissa was talking about returning, right? Returning to work and returning, or coming out of that Zoom bubble and going back to in-person things. And I guess I'm wondering and you alluded to some of the challenges, but are there unique challenges that either haven't been discussed in terms of, the pandemic, or unique challenges now that we're opening up again? What are these challenges, and, how can we address them? Does someone want to start us off with that, or not everyone? Can someone speak to that?
Yeah, I can start us off. a lot of the challenges that we face came from both staff and clients. From the staff perspective, I kind of agree. I agree with Melissa. Some of the great points was that we were able to develop a strong work-life balance where people were really able to take care of themselves, take care of their mental health, really put into focus stuff that they were struggling with. Some people were able to go back to school because everything was remote. So it was really positive. For the most part, it was a very positive experience to be able to help develop. The struggle was that coming back into the space, the expectation from our organization was that we needed to come back full force immediately. There was no transition plan set up to like slowly scale people back. We were told that like everyone needs to be back full time, which people struggled with. And I think the way we were able to like really commit to what we were doing is because we understood that without us being there 5 days a week, that our clients really suffered from lack of resources or access to resources that they didn't have access to in terms of like housing. We found that a lot of our trans youth lost a lot of their housing during the pandemic. And unfortunately around the state, there was less programs, traditional programs for young adults, especially LGBTQ young adults within the state. So we've been trying to find access to more resources around housing, gender affirming care, and we really saw a shock was the mental health referrals from BIPOC LGBTQ youth. Being stuck at home in situations that were dangerous for them, traumatic or abusive, really did a number on their mental health. And we saw that when we started doing services, especially telehealth services for mental health, the majority of our clients getting referred were BIPOC LGBTQ youth who really needed it. Which is why we do our best to prioritize BIPOC LGBT youth on our wait list for mental health services, especially for our outpatient services.
Great, great, thank you. Would anyone else like to speak to this before we move on? Melissa, go ahead.
I wanted to really appreciate what you just shared, Chuck, and I also wanted to add, I think like the provider piece coming back to work is a unique situation, right? So here, therapy, for example, is not too difficult to do in a Zoom context, although it does not work for all clients and it does not work for all providers. And so I think being required to come back full time for folks with children is very, very difficult. I think that because childcare is still going to be an issue and people have worked out things from working at home, that was a very big barrier, I think, for a lot of people that I know with children. And then coming back again is a barrier in a different way. I'm finding that there's an expectation now that therapists will maybe just be all virtual, that we don't need office space. We don't need to be here as a team. We don't need to be in person at all. And like for some providers, that is very difficult because the in-person relationships are really beneficial. I also have found that there are folks who feel anxious about being forced to return to an in-person. I've had clients both ways, actually. Ones who say, I really need to see you in person. We see a large population of neurodiverse folks here at Trans Health. And so it really varies per person. For some people, online is great. They open up a lot more. They're able to come more easily to sessions. They feel able to communicate in a way that works better for them. For some people, it's really difficult to do a Zoom session. And I have folks who are like, please, please, please let me come back in person. And I have folks who are like, please, please don't make me come back in person. And so I think like the flexibility is really important and to maintain this ability to see people virtually. And there's access, right? You don't need to drive here. If your parents work, you can, I have kids who can log themselves into an appointment right after school when their parents are still at work. That's always been a big barrier. And that's been a real benefit. And then, on the other hand, for some people, it's really necessary to have that in-person, face-to-face energetic exchange, especially when you're doing like in-depth trauma work. So it's a really interesting kind of a tapestry of what is difficult and what is beneficial of it. And I think that it is pretty unique to person and provider. And I really urge organizations who are thinking about this to really hear the voices of both their clients and their providers about what works and not sort of force everybody to fit into one model. I feel like those days have passed and we need to think in a more complex and nuanced way about the services we offer and the things we offer to our employees that will benefit our ability to maintain a work-life balance, to maintain professional connections that are really important, to maintain really positive care for our patients, to give them what they need to benefit them.
Thank you. Thank you. Kirsten or Louay, would you like to? You don't have to, but
No, I agree, and again, echoing on all of that, is that bringing our youth back into the space, I think one of the exciting parts was everyone couldn't wait to get back together and to have that social interaction. And I think for us too, the overstretch or the challenge was the expectations of everything just going full force all over again, and really having to take things step by opening up the space slowly, and then having to have things pulled back. And we only have 2 full-time staff, and the rest are adult and youth volunteers and staff members that come in. So being able to really organize and find who felt comfortable enough to come back in and start building it up, that is where our challenges were. But as time went on, people were just really happy to get back. So we've been fortunate, and we still have our struggles, but we've been really fortunate with the staff that we have, that they have just really come in and have dedicated themselves to meet every single challenge that, when the youth come back in, they're seeking, the connection, they're seeking resource. And with that, we were faced with, in the midst of this pandemic, one of our challenges was our beloved executive director, who was retiring, was retiring prior to the pandemic hitting, and then stayed on. And we ended up having to go through a whole interview process to seek out, without being able to meet someone in person and, to get that feel. But we were really so lucky and so blessed that we ended up with a phenomenal executive director that came with such a depth of experience that really took charge. And in the midst of us not being able to be together and with the youth, he really, along with our program director, have molded and created NAGLI and transcended us to another level, which has been really amazing work they've done. So I can't give more credit to the 2 of them, and every challenge they've met it full force, and have worked with all of our providers, to get them back in, to make sure that resources and testing and counseling has been available from the get-go since we opened our doors.
Great, thank you. Luay, do you want to weigh in?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that as an organization that's sort of trying to sort of move back into a more hybrid and in-person model, it's definitely been interesting, especially with like the group events that we used to have, how to sort of have that in an online and remote space. I think that what has worked for us the most is, especially for those group events, just having things to do where what you are doing is sort of mirrored in parallel on the screen, so that there's sort of that same effect of having a group activity, even if everyone's camera is off. Things like, we got a sponsorship with this company called Chow Bus, which delivers Asian American groceries to different people. So having events like virtual cooking, where we explore different cultures, and then even if you have your camera off, just having the mirroring and having the same, taste experience and smells and everything just sort of mirrored back to you, knowing that you have that connection, even though it is completely virtual, is something that's really great. So yeah, I think that just being able to engage sort of all those aspects of human connection is really necessary in that sort of remote environment for these group events that are very hard to recreate. That being said, I think Melissa made a great point earlier of just being able to have the choice of whether or not you want to, stay within the comfort of your home, whether or not you want to go into these physical safe spaces yourself. I think that it's sort of been, a plus side of this whole experience is introducing this as a potential add-on to the model of care that we've had, that you don't need to physically come in every single time if you want to connect with the community. And just having this as a viable option has been a plus side, definitely.
Thank you. I'm gonna take some questions. The final, our final scripted question, I think we'll do toward the end because it's sort of a, I want to get into some of the more of the issues if that's okay with everybody. So one of the questions that we got from a participant is that they're wondering whether there are waiting periods that you're experiencing in relation to finding specialized therapists. And we also had a question about insurance. So if you know something about the insurance that you take, that, sharing that as well. So can you discuss waiting periods? Are you experiencing waiting periods, and is it how is that going? Someone? I see everyone nodding. Go ahead, Melissa, and then we'll go to Kirsten.
I mean, I'm laughing because the wait lists are just out of this world. I don't even know. I mean, I think before I left BHN, we maybe had a maybe longer wait list than I had experienced in my time being there. There is a team there called the Empowerment Project through Behavioral Health Network, and that is a team that I started when I was there. They're trained to provide gender affirming care to folks in the BHN system. They had a wait list for the first time since they had started. We had such a long wait list that people were waiting 6 to 9 months before we were able to call them for an appointment. This is part of why we're now doing internal referrals only, although we opened our internal referral wait list for, I think it was 48 hours, and we had about 35 referrals from our 2 primary care providers and 1 med prescriber, and then a small number from people we wrote letters for. So that was a 48-hour window that people just were sending us referrals, and we're a very small team. And so, yeah, the wait list is, and we're just, everybody on every level of this organization has to just keep saying, I'm sorry, we don't have any therapy openings. I'm sorry, I don't know any therapists who are taking clients, especially therapists who see children and adolescents. It's very, very difficult to find providers for them out here. And so, yeah, wait lists everywhere are just out of this world. It's really very, very difficult in Western Mass and we have a lot of therapists out here. We are therapist heavy in the Pioneer Valley, and it's very, very difficult to find therapists for sure.
Probably even more so for someone who's gender affirming and has that training and all that kind of thing. Yes.
Yes. And we also see, like, I write letters for folks who have therapists, but their therapists don't feel confident writing them a letter for surgery. So they come to us for letters, even though they have other mental health supports. So, and I've also heard from people who say, my therapist is okay, but whenever I bring up gender, they change the subject. So that's not very helpful to me because it is a part of my life, right? And so we do hear that as well. That people like sort of are making do with therapists who like a part of their life just is off the table for a conversation, which I think we can all agree that happens, I think, to people with a lot of different identities. And that's always really hard to hear when that happens.
Thank you. Kirsten?
I was just wanted to add on, trying to find a therapist has been such a challenge. And even those that we know that we have, you say your relationships with, calling in, trying to put those that have, higher needs that really are at higher risk to try to connect. It has been quite a challenge. And knowing therapists and trying to, call somebody to say, can you do me this favor? I really have somebody that is in, just such critical need for care has been such a challenge, as well as, as Melissa said, finding therapists that have the training and have the skill set. For me, it was like, back in the day doing HIV work, right? Trying to find doctors that were willing to have conversations about sex. That it's now hopefully that based on this pandemic, the good things coming out of it is really seeing the overall need, right? For the level of education and openness and the ability to have, conversations and provide, the openness. We're all here experiencing different experiences, but we're all here experiencing the same things. So yes, for us, the challenge has been real, like everyone else, the lack of folks to be able to reach out to the therapist, overworked, stretched out. And, based on the ones that I know, their hearts are so big in wanting to help everyone, but there's the burnout factor. And I'm sure Melissa can attest to that, I would imagine, because you don't want to see anybody fall through the cracks. But in the same token, self-care is also really critical as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. Louay or Shaquille? Louay, go ahead.
So I wanted to add on two things. So first of all, we actually just trained a new cohort of peer leaders at MAP. So if any of the people in attendance think that their clients could benefit from, peer counseling with us, I'd be happy to connect you with our peer leaders. It's also on our general website. So yeah, that has been really exciting. But I think also the second thing is it's not only like therapists and licensed counselors that are in short demand. It's also just very sort of basic aspects of care, like primary care physicians, other specialists just are all completely booked out. And I think that it's also so important to recognize that all of these aspects of what we consider to be physical health can so deeply impact mental health as well. And everything is just so, intertwined, and everything is also just so restricted and unavailable. And I think that has been a huge sort of burden on the people that we've talked with.
Thank you. Thank you. Shaquille?
Yeah, absolutely. Since Boston Glass Works is such a marginalized community, we already have a huge waiting list for people, especially for people who don't have insurance. For people who don't know, our outpatient services are free. You don't need insurance for them. We don't need documentation for them. And we do bill for our CGPA services. We do bill insurances. So Mass Health, private insurances. Yes, somebody just put in chat, it's hard to find queer, trans-friendly BIPOC therapists. Absolutely. Boston Glass definitely has that benefit of taking in like clinical interns who identify as BIPOC, queer, and trans to kind of cover all that whole spectrum. I think at our longest point, our wait list was probably like 4 months long to find a therapist. And that's really just because we don't have the funding to hire a full-time therapist who's able to like actually come in and do the work. And our cohorts leave in May. So there's a huge like 5-month gap where our wait list just fills back up because we don't have enough full-time staff, clinical staff to support them. And to answer another question that was in the chat, we do run support groups to help offset that deficit. So we do the trans support group that's run by trans and non-binary staff here at the program. We do something called Glass Chats. We also developed a Discord page throughout the pandemic. So we have a lot of youth who engage that way. We'll do movie streamings, art club groups. We really have been trying to find any way we can keep people in a good mental space, have them find a way to check in and be able to like really promote the fact that like we're there for them in any sort of capacity.
Kirsten, go ahead.
I just want to add real quick, and one of the things that we're really blessed and fortunate for is our program director, Tony, is also a therapist, Tony Leone. So when I was talking about being overstaffed and finding other therapists, not only has he been doing his role as the program director and creating and really maintaining and keeping the blood flowing through the veins of NAGLI, he has also been taking on, so many of our youth as well. And in between trying to connect them with outside services, he has also been, doing everything in his power, working way beyond any normal business hour in order to ensure that our youth are getting their needs met. So I could not go without mentioning that as well.
And you have support groups as well, right?
Oh, we have a list. I had sent Paula an overview of NAGLI at a glance, and hopefully we'll just get that out to everybody to give an overview. And NAGLI.org, you can definitely go see everything that we offer, but we're pretty substantial. But thank you for.
Yeah, we had a question about support groups, and I think Melissa, does your organization, you have groups or not?
We have a few groups, but only a very few. We just started running those January, I think. So right now we just have Thursday nights at 6. We have just opened them to an integrated format of both in-person and virtual, and they're divided by age group, and they're just a peer support group by age. We're looking to expand that, but we're sort of trying to figure out where the need is to decide which ways to expand. And we also only have 2 people at this moment who are running groups. So we're hoping maybe to expand some more as well when we have more interns next year, because our resources for employees are just really limited. But you can find those on our Instagram, the groups that we have.
Great, thank you. And Luay, you have the other groups, they're peer groups, yes?
Yeah, so right now we're trying to focus on getting the one-on-one sessions back up and running. We are planning on integrating more group support events. We actually have a workshop today at 4 p.m. alongside Boston University Center for Psychiatric Rehabilitation. It's on healthy LGBTQIA relationships. But yeah, for the moment, it's been more like talk and discussion based rather than just sort of more of like a conversational sort of thing.
Rather than a support group, you mean?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, got it. Yes, thank you. So I have another question about during the pandemic, and obviously for forever, we've had a lot of racial unrest in our country, and I'm wondering if you've seen any difference among your Black, Indigenous, or AAPI or Latinx folks during this time, and are there extra stresses, and how has that played out in your organization? Melissa, you're unmuted.
Oh, I am unmuted. I didn't realize that. Sure. Yeah, I can start. So yes, I would say definitely there have been extra stressors, and I have definitely had a lot of conversations with folks. I think something that I have found interesting and something I've done a lot of thinking about as well as a white provider, I've had clients for whom this has really encouraged them to really embrace and explore their racial identity. And I've thought a lot about and had some conversations about the ways that I have and still probably need to get better about bringing conversations about race into the therapy room. And I want to own that as a white provider, that's work that I've been doing. And also I've had clients for whom historically they've told me it wasn't that important to them. It wasn't that important a part of their identity. And I think, again, to say another side of this past 2 years, this has been a very stressful time. And I've also had BIPOC clients and specifically Black clients who are transitioning during this time. And so transgender male clients who are Black men who are living in the world as Black men now during this past few years for the first time in their life. And that has been a really difficult, stressful, and frightening scenario for a lot of people for whom it was difficult enough already, right? And then they were sort of facing the ways that their role in the world had also is perceived as different to others, whether it is perceived as different to themselves or not. And I would say, I think that I'm trying to think how I want to talk about this at my agency. I think that, so this agency is, we're a pretty white organization. We're in a pretty white part of Massachusetts. We have had a lot of discussions about how to ensure that our services are accessible to folks in, for example, Springfield and Holyoke communities, and to make sure that we're a safe space for BIPOC folks in this area and people coming to us for services. And I would say that is a work in progress at Trans Health Northampton, as far as training, education, learning, ongoing learning, and awareness as a really white organization and a white-led organization at this time. That's where I would like to start and stop. And I might have more to say in a moment, so I think a little more.
Thank you. And thank you for, acknowledging, mental health and certainly suicide prevention is primarily a white field. And so, trying to work with these organizations and things, as BIPOC people, we have to sort of find that the way to move forward, I guess. Does someone else have another, some comments on my question? Wait, go ahead.
I can sort of speak to that.
Sure.
I think on a very surface level reply to that question, like, yes, there has been such a huge effect on Asian American Pacific Islander clients. I think both in my personal life, both in like the people that I talk to and work with, just there has not been an API individual I've interacted with who hasn't faced some sort of verbal or physical or sexual harassment, either online or in person, within the past 2-ish years. And that has absolutely had a huge negative impact on mental and physical health and just all aspects of their lives. And I think that on a sort of deeper level, it's also been very interesting trying to sort of grapple with the implications of living in both an API body as well as an LGBTQ plus body. There have been a pretty significant proportion of folks I've talked to who identify as both, but who've had to sort of compartmentalize almost their identity as someone who is queer. Sort of like during a time when API bodies have been so vehemently under attack, it almost felt to them as though they would be like hijacking API voices and movements if they incorporated these other parts of their identity into that portion of their advocacy, as well as like sort of subconsciously, since queerness is so stigmatized and hidden within a lot of API spaces, it's, sort of subconsciously very difficult to fully embrace and advocate for both parts of your identity at once. And even sort of on a personal anecdote, like Harvard has these affinity spaces and groups for marginalized identities, but when you go into the Zoom like meeting for these breakout rooms, they make you choose like, are you a person of color? Do you identify as Black or API or queer or disabled? And you can only choose one, which has been very disheartening and is not how humans exist and move through the world at all. So I think that like at a very sort of basic, like, fundamental level, we do need to be providing so much more support to these groups. At a deeper level, we need to integrate intersectional identities and perspectives and support so much more into these spaces. So yeah, that's what I have to say.
Thank you. Thank you. Shaquille or Kirsten?
Yeah, I think in the short answer, yeah, it was hard. I think speaking for myself, just being a gay BIPOC male working in a white environment in terms of like mental health, when the Black Lives Matter movement really came into Boston, people used to come up to me and act like I was a spokesperson for the Black community, saying that like we were being violent or we didn't know how to like properly advocate for ourselves. And I realized like that's something that our youth face constantly. It's very dangerous to be a Black person in America right now. It's even dangerous when you put in the intersectionality of being Black and trans or Black, trans, and homeless. We did our best throughout the pandemic to really support the youth who were going to be really impacted by racism and homophobia, and we're still continuing to try to do that work. I think what is lacking is that some people don't understand how important intersectionality plays in the safety in terms of necessary access to resources to provide safety for the youth that we work with.
Thank you. Kirsten?
Couldn't agree more. I know for us, opening up satellite offices were really, satellite locations rather, were really important. I know when I started with NAGLI, we predominantly had a huge demographic of Latino and African-American youth that would come. And then as things started changing, we got whiter and we were trying to bring back in BIPOC community and the Latino community. So we ended up opening a satellite office in Lynn, which has been so long overdue. But we're seeing the challenges as well, for us as a board, and creating, the diversity on our board to make sure that we're really reaching out and providing the needed services to everyone. Because as Shaq just said, the intersectionalities of being able to meet people, you can't just cover one section, because people are just, we're a combination, we're a multifaceted group that needs to be, addressed appropriately. So right now, we're actually bringing in to be able to do the appropriate trainings that we need to bring everybody up to speed, so that we can truly bring in and do the appropriate outreach and get the resources needed to those that are in our groups. So nobody feels like they're left out. But just like Louve, and I'm sorry if I got your name wrong, but everything seems so boxed right now. There's one thing, it's like a checkoff. Nobody is just one thing, and finding a way to across the board advocate, right, to have the inclusivity of the totality of who people are. It's that's been, I think, our fight, and one of our battles for the longest time, is being able to recognize that none of us fit in one box.
Great, thank you. Are there any other comments to what other people have said? I just don't want to cut people off before. Good. So we got a question for Lou and Shaq. Are there alternative ways of identifying that aren't visible? And do you feel that LGBTQIA plus term is something that is more functional or practical, or does it not resonate with your community participants and clients? Like how, which is, yeah.
I can start. I feel like there's a lot of alternate ways of identifying people. And I think there's ways that, in terms of visibility, like I can say, like I present as a Black male, first and foremost, to the world. My sexuality is something that people don't take a picture of until they either hear me speak or interact with me, for the most part. But I think it's also the intersection of like disabilities. Like there's certain disabilities that aren't seen. There's certain like mental cognitive delays that are not visible to people. And like, where does those intersectionalities come into play? In terms of like the roundabout LGBTQIA, I feel like for Boston Glass, I feel like that's an intersectionality that's like really hotly debated. Whether or not we are seeing ourselves as Black individuals first and being part of the LGBTQ community second, because of the fact that even within the LGBTQ population, Black, trans, and queer individuals are very much marginalized, fetishized, and really dismissed for the most part.
Thank you. Louie?
I'm having a bit of trouble understanding the question. So it's basically like, are there times when certain identities feel more pertinent to someone's sort of being than like other ones, or?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Let's see. Does the Jennifer L, do you want to clarify that? So while we're seeing if they can clarify, do you, how is, in terms of the AAPI community, what about this LGBTQIA plus? Is that something that people resonate with, or how is that? Yeah.
Yeah. When you say, I guess I'm kind of having issue with like what is meant by resonate. Like, does that mean that they sort of don't subscribe to like a sort of box that's either like L or either G or either B or
Yeah.
et cetera? Or is it just sort of like they more identify under an umbrella term of queer or those sorts of things? Yeah, I'm sorry. I just
No,
think
okay.
I'm a little confused.
No, I mean, I mean, I'm taking it to mean sort of about language, like, how do we identify and how does that relate to the language we use, right? I mean, so, and, for me, for instance, I grew up, I'm a lot older than all of you. So I grew up at a time where, the B wasn't even in the lineup. So, I mean, it was LG and no B, nothing else. And so this kind of thing, it sort of shapes how you view yourself in some ways, what's available and those kinds of things. So,
I see. Okay. Yeah. I think that for a lot of API youth who sort of identify as queer in some way or another, we didn't really have those sort of like spaces to talk about the language that we use and the ways that we sort of categorize ourselves growing up, and into a lot of our adult lives. So like Jennifer was saying, like some folks might identify as same gender loving. And that is definitely something that we do see quite a lot. I think that it is quite a bit of like, we just haven't had those sort of spaces to have these very in-depth discussions about like exploring our identities, within the family, within school, within friends, and all these sort of things. So I think that, like as an umbrella term, LGBTQIA plus is, sort of representative of like, I think it's a great way to sort of label and find community and things like that. But a lot of people just sort of don't have a formal coming out or have these sort of like announcements where they sort of check off boxes of different identities that they are. They just sort of like exist, and then they go into spaces and interact with people and just come as they are.
thank you. So I'd like to invite the audience to ask more questions too. We do have a final question, but I wanted to see what. Let's see. I have a question. So, what are we able to do for adults who are struggling to stay positive during these times? What groups or organizations are in the Boston or Quincy area? It's not just about human rights-based approach to work, school, and health. It's also about emotional support. So I guess again, I think there's a huge need for emotional support, obviously, right, from all of the wait lists and things like that. Are there other ways that we can do this? Shaq, did you want to start?
Yeah, I can answer this one. I was gonna also respond to the last question that was in
Sure.
on the chat around the idea of coming out, and the whole identifying as same gender loving. I've actually never heard of that term before until today. I heard like being put into writing, and for me, it seems like a very like more societal way to say like just say gay. And I feel like if the being to say like gay, I know is kind of taboo in certain circles, but I feel like it's so empowering the fact that like this is how I identify. Like saying I'm same gender loving feels like I'm kind of just like copping out for the softness of someone who's not able to understand the fact that like this is my identity. I'm taking back a part of myself that people are shaming me for. And when we talk about coming out, especially for like Black queer individuals, we talk, I think in terms of being in a Western concept, I think it's also a form of, it could be a form of empowerment for themselves. It could be a form of just being able to become more of their authentic selves and their authentic nature, especially within our trans population. It's very empowering for them to say, like, have that moment, like, I'm identifying as male, or I'm identifying as female, and to have everyone say, like, yep, we accept you. And be able to, we accept you in this moment, we accept you in the process, and we will support you throughout all of it. Especially if you're not able to get that from your own biological family. In terms of like the adult emotional support, I think that it's a huge issue right now in terms of like adults suffering from mental health And especially since we work with a population that our population ends at 29 at Boston Glass. And we've seen that we have a lot of adults in our population that suffer from a mix of dual diagnosis between substance use and mental disorders. And they've really been impacted by the pandemic. And the issue that we find is that like there's not a lot of resources to address the duality of what they're going through in terms of how the substance use impacts the mental instability or the emotional instability that they're going through, and how do they find people who are able to resonate with what they have experienced and the trauma they've been experiencing. I think we definitely need to find ways to pour more resources into that community, but to find and hire more peer leaders who've been through that path, be able to have that one-on-one direct support with people in the community.
Thank you. Someone else? Melissa, go ahead.
I do want to put a quick shout out to one of our drop-in groups. It is monthly on Thursday nights. However, we have a group. So right now it is 30 plus, which we realize isn't a huge frame of age span. However, and so I have been pushing to have one that's maybe like 45 or 50 plus, because we do have a population of older, I don't want to say older adults, but 50 plus patients here at Trans Health. I will say that my caseload oddly is mostly 14-ish and 45 plus, and that's my span. I don't have a lot of people in the middle on my particular caseload, but that group has folks in it who are in their 60s and 70s. And so if people have adult people in their life, clients, patients, friends, selves, who'd like to come to a group that has some older folks in it, we do have that group once a month, and it is I think it's a really important group. The folks who are in it are pretty isolated, do have a difficult time finding and meeting peers their age. I will also say I've got a handful of clients on my caseload who are what I call like later life transitioners, people who transitioned in their 40s, 50s, 60s, which is a very different life experience than transitioning when you're 19 or 20. And so finding supports for those folks is very difficult as well, because when you go to peer groups, they tend to be younger people, and it's a very different experience. And I would also say not older, I hate to say that, they're my age, people in their 40s plus who are non-binary also, I hear from people have a really hard time finding community. I think that is true of non-binary folks across the age span. I would say at Trans Health, the people we have heard the most feedback from are non-binary folks who've had really, we hear from a lot of people who've had very difficult times in health systems, but non-binary folks in particular have spoken about the care they're receiving here, being able to be a non-binary person and receive healthcare, being able to receive hormone care that is not binary. That's a real issue in medical systems, and that it tends to be sort of like, pick one. These are your choices, like feminizing, masculinizing, period, which is not how hormones work. And our providers are really experienced at helping people figure out what their goals are in that area. But I definitely would love to hear about other adult supports for people that are out there, particularly around people who transition later life or people who are non-binary who might find that a beneficial group to be a part of. I agree, it is a real need. Yeah.
Thank you.
Just to chime in, on that, is that I also feel like, considering the fact that Boston being the leader at the time of, marriage equality and inclusivity, we have lost, we no longer have a gay community, right? We, in the sense of, we don't have the bars in the places to go anymore where people were learning to come out, right? Where you found connection and community and built things off of that, right? Being able to go out and have outreach providers in those communities, right? To be able to find out where the need is, to do the assessments so that groups can be created. So now having the challenges of space and funding and being able to provide the right resources to bring people back together, especially adults, right? We're looking at, for the longest time, it was everything around adults, and it was the youth that were kind of left out. And now we have all these amazing, robust programs, importantly so for youth, that the needs of the adults that never had the support and never knew what it was like to have the level of camaraderie and connection and being able to be seen being younger, we're finding so much more struggle. And we're finding the challenges of the addictions and everything else that are happening, which are anyway statistically, you know, our umbrella and our group of folk already are high level in that. Now we're just exceeding it, as we know, as we can go and get all the stats on the CDC. But it's right now, I know under Fenway, I had mentioned I sit as a co-chair for vaccine trials, but I know that Fenway, now that we're trying to come back into bringing everybody back together, will be, and they normally do have different programs. So I checked the Fenway website, and again, it's potentially in the hopes that, you know, someone will take a lead. Like for years, I had led a lesbian spirituality group for 10 years, and then it kind of fell off when things got cut, you know, when fundings got cut. And I've had so many women reach back out to me to restart again. And I guess it's going to take those you know, those of us who have the connection or the desire to also step up again, right? It's about that place of how do we advocate for our community, and where do we stand, and how are we going to try to make it better for everyone as well as ourselves. So I just feel like the pandemic, in my experience, and has brought about a lot more leaders, right? A lot more people willing to ask the tough questions and step out front to find ways and find funding to be able to create safer spaces in different things that are allowing us to be able to be seen, heard, and gather. So for those that are looking for support groups, definitely look to the Fenway website and see what they're offering, and reach out to their navigators, because they normally have some great resources.
Great, thank you. Thank you. Wei, go ahead.
I think that it's sort of a double-edged sword for MAP, because we rely heavily on our peer leaders, but the vast majority of our peer leaders are undergraduate students. So when that's the case, a lot of the sort of people that they draw in are going to be from that sort of same demographic, at least age-wise. So even though there are so many different experiences and things that can be related between the two, a huge focus of our organization in the past and right now has been on a relatively narrow group of people. And that's not to say that like high school and, you know, undergraduate college students don't have a huge mental health burden on them. They absolutely do. But then there's also many things to consider, like as soon as they graduate, like where are those support systems going to go? It's not like they're magically cured of any sort of ailments they have as soon as they have a degree. It's just that they're sort of ripped from this community that they had relied on for 4 years, and now they don't have access to those same resources that they once had through school. So yeah, I think that there's a huge need to sort of expand our sort of awareness and our resources to these older age groups. And yeah, I think that it's definitely a huge concern that people should be more aware of.
Thank you. So I wanted to get back to something actually that was talked about a little bit, because I had lost track of it myself, which is Melissa brought up, you know, the ways that some of our organizations are quite white in their composition. And so I just wanted to do a little quick shout out for something that the MCSP Alliance for Equity put together, which was a toolkit for organizations who want to move their organization toward equity. And we'll put that in the chat for people. It's free, it's online, it's the Department of, MCSP Alliance for Equity put this out, and it might be helpful for some people. So we'll put that there. So I'm gonna ask our final question. If there are other questions, you can put them in the chat still. But so what is needed to build an even more robust community of support and connection that inspires a passion for living? What do we need to do now? I mean, we've heard some things already, but how can we move forward? And, and also, what inspires you about the work you're doing? What inspires you as you go forward? Does anyone want, let's see. Luay, can you start us off? Is that okay? Or you want, yeah?
Yeah, sure. I think that in general, what needs to happen is like we need to stop focusing on one fire at a time as it pops up. And I think that what I mean by that is sort of like we need more sort of early life preventive services. We need more comprehensive intersectional services. We need people to not just be focusing on one crisis at a time after it has already occurred. And I don't know if you want me to get more into specifics.
Sure.
But,
Yeah, we have some.
I'll let everyone else speak and then come back to it after.
Okay, all right, we
but
can have a
I-
conversation about this. for
Yeah,
sure.
I think that just something that inspires me about the work I do is just how I think how resilient and capable human beings are, just as organisms, as people, just like we have the capability to just survive and persist and have hope in so many of these dark situations. And I think seeing that on a daily basis, seeing that in the peer leaders I work with, in all of our members that sort of try and, put out these little fires as they come up, even though, to the detriment of their own well-being sometimes. And I don't know, it just always amazes me how much hope and persistence that people have. So yeah, it's my very cheesy response, but
No, I think it's inspiring. Anyway, thank you. Thank you. Shaq?
Yeah, so I would say definitely having competent intersectional care and resources for youth, and especially transitional age youth who need support in navigating the system, finding competent mental health care, being able to build community support, access safe housing. I mean, we can talk about this all day. I think there's just so much that's needed. And I'll say the thing that keeps me motivated and what I'm really passionate about my work is the fact that I get to work directly with the population. Every single day I come into work, I get to say hi to all the youth in the space, work with my staff around finding resources, teach them how to navigate the systems that they've been unfortunately pushed into. And I think, just like Louis said, just the resilience and the determination to achieve more than what society had labeled them as or said that they could achieve. I love watching them break through those barriers.
Thank you. Kirsten?
I definitely, to add on, I mean, what they had said, but one of the things that I would love to see outside of all of the needed programming that we need is to bring back, right, coalitions. Like this panel is huge. It's so important to bring back leaders to have the discussions, right? To then go back and get a coalition put together, right? So take this to another level and to have, whether it's us, bring other leaders to a table and create, something where we get together once a month, once a quarter to sit down, really bring up what's going on. What are we facing? What are we challenging? What are the challenges? How do we, collaboratively find a way to get over these hurdles? And it's a great way to provide support to each other as well, right? Best practices and how to serve and what people are seeing and what the similarities. And for me, the inspiration from day one, and again, for me, I talk about NAGLI because it's that's the blood that pumps through my veins, is that over the last 15 years, what doesn't get old is to watch these amazing, in most cases, and I'll go with Louis about being cheesy. It's the caterpillars that come, that come moving in slowly into a space. And then all of a sudden just watching the development, right? The ability to feel comfortable in their skin, to be who they are, to be seen, to be heard, and to watch them blossom into these beautiful butterflies, right? Wildflowers that have now gone on to lead groups, right? We're youth led as well. And to see, see them just have this glow, and those that, have a talent that wouldn't share if they could play. We had one young girl that we never knew she could play the ukulele, and she was always so quiet and so, reserved. And then all of a sudden, when she started playing, when she felt comfortable and safe and connected, to see her in her essence in front of everyone and just being witnessed, right? Like to be able to witness each other. And that for me is what keeps me inspired, is to just be grateful enough to participate in impacting, these youth turning into amazing, productive young adults that have a lot to offer the world.
Thank you. Melissa?
I mean, I think I also have some like really concrete ideas of things that are needed or might be beneficial. And I always have like a million ideas of things that I think would be so great to do, right? I think a lot though about like training of providers. I think a lot about training providers in communities that they're serving. I think it means a lot to our clients here that they can have therapists who are transgender, therapists who are non-binary. That is we have found, we all have noticed a sense that our clients here are able to do deeper work much more quickly. I think because of a stress that is removed from the therapeutic relationship, and feeling that their gender is not going to come into the conversation unless they need it to. And that is a real stress relief for them trying to do work here. And so I think a lot about that. And I think also a lot about the sustainability and longevity of particularly mental health care. And that the volume of clients that we're expected to see, and the ability to do that consecutively year after year after year, really takes a toll as providers. I think, we throw around burnout, but it is no joke, right? And I know amazing therapists who are not sure how much longer they can do the work they're doing, because the volume that they're asked, the amount of work they're asked to do is not realistic long term. And people who go into private practice, because the volume of work they're expected to do in systems is too high, and in private practice they're seeing fewer people and they're also taking fewer insurances, it's less accessible. And I think that's a real issue. And in order for people who I really believe in, who I help train, who I think are amazing clinicians, continuing to do the work that I think is so important, that I value so deeply. And I think that is part of what also keeps me going, is partly, seeing people who I worked with as students become amazing therapists and do amazing work in the community, and being able to refer to former supervisees, I think is a really beautiful experience. And also I do a lot of long-term therapy. And so to see people do the really slow, painstaking, careful work of years and years of therapy, and then get to see, like over the past 7 years, look how far you have come, and to sit with them and really embrace that slow change is so powerful. And I don't think it's cheesy at all. I mean, people are amazingly resilient. I feel grateful every day that I'm allowed to in any way witness or participate in a person's journey to do the kind of work that my clients do every day, and their like continued ability to reach out for connection. It's so humbling to me, and just really impressive. I also get really emotional about just the power of the humans that I get to interact with, both as providers and clients. I think that is definitely inspiration. And here it's a really amazing thing to be able to refer somebody for psych services, for primary care services, for hormones, and say, like, I trust these people. I know that you will go and see Andrew and have a good experience. I know that you will go and see Aaliyah and have amazing primary care. I know that your parents can talk to Drew and learn about hormones in a way that feels accessible and safe for them. And that is a really amazing thing here as well. And I think amazing for our patients as well.
So one of the things that was commented upon in the chat was how to do this in our current political climate, given that so many states and governments are taking away rights as opposed to adding them. So Kirsten, I saw your hand go up.
Well, one thing that I wanted to say that was really exciting about NAGLI from when I first started, which I was going to add that I'd love to see also happen again, is we've lost our activists, right? Like the bringing back the ability to organize again and to have that, you know, we used to, and I say this in the way like we would storm the State House when there were certain things that were happening, and we'd make sure to be knocking on doors and people telling their stories. And then there, you know, there came that place again where it was inside, you know, we had to withdraw because of certain things, but to find a way, right, to start getting our voices heard, bringing it together, and going back up and doing that work and going to the State House, and I think it's you know, it's again going back to just the like Harvey Milk, right? Unless you know, you need to come out and you need to tell your story, and once you people know who you are and see who you are as a human, they can't, you know, their biases will then either it's so deep rooted that it's their own thing, or you can't still hold that when you know somebody, right? So for me to get back, you know, with these states is everybody kind of went to sleep for a while. We became very complacent and very comfortable, and we allowed the insidiousness of other people's biases and fears and ignorance to rise up within that political scene and start changing things. And now it's you know, it's the breaking of the paradigm. We have to knock everything down to rebuild. And now this is the time that we have the opportunity to find out, you know, who are we? Who are we as a collective consciousness? And where are the leaders going to rise, and how are we all going to come together and make a difference? And we have that power.
Great. Someone else want to respond to that? Anyone? Our current political climate. So if not, so one of the things I wanted to alert people to, there wasn't a comment about the legislature, which, you know, what Kirsten just brought up at the State House, and MCSP is having its legislative advocacy day next Wednesday, where we go in and we advocate for suicide prevention funds at the State House. I don't know other bills and things that are coming up that relate to all of this, but I do know we're doing advocacy day next Wednesday, and I will try to put the link in the chat. I'm working on it. Does anyone, I don't know if anyone else has any comments about the State House or anything that's going on in the legislature that people know of that we need to be alerted to. So there's Paula points out there's a handout for the link to the commission, which she put in the Mass LGBTQ Youth Commission. So that might be something people are interested in the chat. Any other, let's see, I want to see if this link works. I'm going to put a link in the chat. We'll see if it works. I just took it from the registration for the advocacy day, so we'll see. Any other last words? Yes.
I'd just love to share just one story. I think I touched on real quick about Lenny from Brazil. So I just wanted to, just the power of connection and, you know, of human connection as we talk about resilience and love and connection and reaching out. So I just want to read this just little quick thing. One of our youth in particular, Lenny, which obviously it's not his real name, began participating in our transcendence group from his home in Brazil at the height of the pandemic. He quickly bonded with the group and continues to participate via Zoom to this present day. When the group reconvened in person, Lenny continued to participate virtually. Seeing the difficulty of living as a trans person in Brazil, our NAGLI youth, which they're just amazing, decided to reach out in a special way to Lenny, and they shipped him a huge NAGLI care package, which he proceeded to open during one of the group meetings. And it was a sign of real connection between our NAGLI youth here and the vulnerable trans person halfway across the globe. And I think for me, like wanting to just talk about that in this group is just we don't realize the impact that we have at any given moment, and just the kindness and the love, and to extend and to just see people, right? We don't know what somebody's going through, and just to extend our kindness and love no matter what.
Thank you. That's a wonderful place to end this panel. I appreciate all of your participation. Thank you so much for your insight, your words of wisdom, your stories. I think you all have such important work that you're doing. And I thank everyone who came to hear our wonderful panelists and Matt talk about data. Paula, do you want to say anything?
I am so deeply moved by all of you. I just feel like a mist, in the corner of my eyes. And I look forward to watching this over again. And everything that you had to say brought to me like an awareness to the audience, and kind of brought the data to life. And there are so many areas we can bond together and moving forward. And I'm just so proud of this entire event. Thank you, Pata, for being a wonderful moderator. We really appreciate you and keeping the conversation going. Kirsten, Louay, Melissa, Shaq, thank you so much. And thank you for the whole planning group who was involved in putting this together, folks from the Emergency Response for Suicide Prevention team at DMH, the DPH folks, our Epi, Matt, thank you very much. He's popping up to say hello. And please pay attention to your handout that Matt put together. It's really brilliant. The second page has a lot of links, including the trans law in Massachusetts and a number of things the commission is report, which is well worth reading. There's so much on there that really is worth your time and attention, and it's one page if you count front and back. So thank you. Please stay involved in the Mass Coalition for Suicide Prevention. You'll hear from us about other events that we're going to do, and thank you for being part of Passion for Living. We appreciate your passion.